so excited to see all of these great names and people that are joining us. And I'm really excited that you chose to join us for the second of our third series in the Resources for Growth. And so this is the second webinar for the CDFI Loan Fund Business Model, the 4 Essential Pillars Framework webinar today. As I mentioned, I'm Amber Kuhar-Bell. I'm the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer here at OFN. And I am joined today by Leslie Hoffman, the Principal and Founder of LEH Consulting Group, and my dear friend, John Holtzclaw, the President and CEO of Rochdale Capital. We are going to have a really robust discussion today, hopefully, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A because I find that to be, no shade, Leslie and John, but part of the best part of the discussion. I'm going to get started with a few of the housekeeping tips and background before turning it over to our presenters. So in terms of housekeeping, I want to note that this webinar is being recorded. So if you are not okay with that, please disconnect at this time. We've allowed, again, 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the webinar for our audience questions. With that being said, please submit your questions into the Zoom chat when they occur to you. And I really encourage you to use the chat function to introduce yourself, share comments, interact with other participants. But while we're talking, can you please remain on mute? It'd be great. Thank you. So next slide. I'd really like to acknowledge our sponsors. Capital One and Fifth Third Bank provide generous funding and support to develop the resources for CDFI Growth, toolkits, and webinar series. So thank you. Next slide. Our resources for CDFI Growth and webinars highlight the new toolkits that OFN has developed to support CDFI practitioners. Like many of you joining today, we're really looking to maximize our organizational sustainability and impact and really help support our CDFI members. This came out of our deep listening to CDFI members, and these toolkits were also developed in response to that, but also in conjunction with our members. So John is on here. He reviewed the toolkit and helped provide really valuable feedback, one of many CDFIs. And so on this particular topic, we are really excited to start building this out and have this toolkit for best practice resources on a variety of topics. Currently, we have 3 toolkits. Our first was a webinar that we had last week, the Cash Management Toolkit, which was released again last week. And it gives an overview guide on how to think about efficient cash management, as well as 3 starter Excel toolkits to assist with cash flow modeling and asset liability matching. What's great about these toolkits is these Excel models, you can take it and make them your own. And I will give you information later on how to access that. Second is this webinar for Essential Pillars framework. And then finally, next week on September 28th, we will be discussing our loan policy toolkit, which is designed to help CDFIs create, refresh, or rewrite their loan policies. Things that OFN and everyone should do on a regular basis, right? So the registration link will be shared in this chat. And these toolkits were specifically designed for loan funds, but they can be adapted for CDFI credit unions, banks, and venture loan funds as well. Next slide, please. So where can you access these? You can access and download the Resources for Growth toolkits as they get added onto CDFI Connect. We're going to house all of our resources there. And you can do that by navigating to the resource drop-down menu, go to OFN resources, it's all on the screen. Currently, we have 2 toolkits available, Cash Management and the 4 Pillars Framework. If you're joining us live, which you are right now, we'll share the direct link to both toolkits in the chat. If you don't have a CDFI Connect account, it's free, and we will, and you can click the link and it will walk you through that as well. So that's the rest of my introduction. I just want to say how excited I am to share this particular toolkit with you. It's our hope that you find it useful guidebook for new and emerging CDFIs, as well as growing and expanding CDFIs that are looking to refresh and revisit their business models. The framework aims to be a concise, practical handbook that covers core elements of every CDFI's business model: strategy, lending policies and procedures, organizational infrastructure, and financial strategy, and is tended to be used in conjunction with the other toolkits. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John.
Thanks so much, Amber. I was telling somebody in the chat that they were dredging the bottom of the barrel when they asked me to be on this webinar, but I'm honored to be here today. For many of you who don't know me, I'm John Holtzclaw. I am the president and CEO of Rochdale Capital, emerging CDFI with the mission of the promotion of community ownership and cooperative principles. It was founded by the National Cooperative Bank. That said, as somebody who's been in this industry 20 years, probably the most humbling thing I've ever done up to this point was to start a emerging CDFI. And so I told Leslie, where were you in 2021 when I needed all of this information before? But after reviewing it and reading it, it did several things. It helped validate some of the things that we were doing as an emerging CDFI. And then it helped also some things that we hadn't thought about. And so I just feel excited about other emerging CDFIs and ones that have been around for a while, because this is in my mind, a living, breathing document that anyone can use or customize to their. Nobody ever says to you, well, how do you start a CDFI? That said, like I said, it's been an invaluable tool in just a short amount of time that I've had a chance to review it. I'm honored that OFN asked me to do so. And I'll say this, and I'll make my own personal ask, if there's anyone on the webinar who has any advice for me still, please put it in the chat, or I'll put my email out there, because again, there's such a wealth of knowledge on this Zoom right now. And I want to take advantage of it. It's a two-way street in my regard. So please take an opportunity to either shoot me something in the chat, or I'll put my email address there so we can talk. And I hope, looking forward to seeing many of you in New York City at the conference. So that's my 2 cents for now. And I will turn it over to the brains of the operation, if that's okay.
Well, thank you, John, and I will step in. I don't know that I'm the brains of the operation, but I'm just excited to have the chance to be with you all today. And so my name is Leslie Hoffman. I was the principal author of the framework, and I want to start with a huge acknowledgement to a variety of people. First and foremost, really want to acknowledge Amber and Sindhu. They really were walking alongside of us and were the leaders and the inspiration behind this entire effort. So really just want to acknowledge and thank them for their inspiration around all of this and realization that this was a needed tool in the industry. So just really want to start with that acknowledgement of them and OFN. Also really want to acknowledge, John, you and the other CDFIs who provided us some feedback on this tool. So thank you for your valuable time. We know you all have so much on your plates these days, so thank you. And I also really want to acknowledge a couple of colleagues of mine who joined me in this work. The famous Donna Fabiani, who everybody on this call knows because you received emails from her for many years and know her by her fame at OFN. Donna was the project manager. Just really appreciate her leadership. And then my fellow consulting colleagues, Barbara Ekblad and Lisa Wagner, who helped provide some guidance along the way. Shout outs to so many people who I learned from in the industry over the years. We hope that this is a comprehensive, although not exhaustive, a comprehensive tool for all of you in the industry and the incredible work that you're doing every day to help community. So I'm going to take you through at a very high level what you can expect to find in the framework. And then we're going to, I'm going to ask you a question. We're curious to hear some things from you all. Then you'll hear a little bit more from John about his own experiences with the framework, and we're then excited to have more discussion. So a few things, high level, to just keep in mind around this tool. The first is that the idea behind this tool is that we hope that the framework works holistically. It's intended to be, as I said before, comprehensive, not exhaustive. We really want this tool to be something that is user-friendly and flexible. The pillars are meant to be interdependent, and you see them in front of you right now. So they function a bit like a Venn diagram. So each pillar of the 4 has its own domain of needs, as you all know, as both emerging and longtime practitioners, and priorities. And there's also some critical overlapping areas where we think the pillars really mutually support and reinforce one another. Piece number 2 to keep in mind overall, that Amber's already talked about, that is the framework is really broad. So it's intended to be useful for CDFIs, frankly, of any size and any stage. The idea is that this is pretty foundational. So the framework really provides you some structure around management that's essential to high-performing mission-aligned CDFIs. So for any CDFI, large or small, emerging or long-standing, we hope that this provides you a complete view of the most critical elements for management. Third, we hope that applying the framework is an ongoing process. And we're going to ask you, we want to check in on that. We're curious to hear, fair warning, want to ask who more recently has been refreshing some of their approaches within their strategic management within your CDFI. So we think that the framework really invites a continuous improvement lens of iteration when you're adapting, and goodness knows all of you have been working to adapt to changing conditions, seizing on new opportunities, and responding to times of crisis. And boy, are we coming out of one. So we want you to be able to, we hope, use this framework as an ongoing basis to revisit your strategic alignment and your tactical execution. Fourth, we know that frameworks and models overall are strengthened by systems of accountability. So just a heads up, when you think about using this tool in various ways, it really does work hand in hand with a proactive, transparent, and rigorous process for managing your operations to meet your strategic goals and your annual operating objectives. And then finally, an ongoing conversation, a critical core of why we're all here, and that is this notion of equity and inclusion as ever-present elements. And so just naming that you all are working every day to uncover, name, and dismantle systems of bias and exclusion in your communities. And we know that we within the industry can and need to scan for possible unconscious bias, structural discrimination, systemic exclusion within our own tools, our processes, and practices that we create and we participate in. So we've got a tool, for example, that's linked within our framework that can help you look for those things and scan your own internal environment. So those are some things to keep in mind. Now let's get to the meat of the matter. What I'm going to do is walk you through at a very high level the contents of each of these 4 pillars, and then we'll pause. And I want to hear from you all. Who right now, or have you recently been really looking to refresh, revisit, or as John talked about, build some of the core elements of strategic management for your CDFI? So in the tool itself, here's what you will read for each of the pillars you just saw. We give you a high level definition of what the pillar is, then why it matters, and then we break down each key component, and you'll hear what those key components are in just a moment. And then finally, we wrap each of the pillars with both a bulleted recap and some pro tips that those of us who've been doing the work both as practitioners and consultants over the last couple of decades offer from our own lenses, and got some great contributions as well from colleagues. So that's what you'll get in each of the pillars. And now let's talk about what the pillars contain themselves. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to start to deep dive now, give you just a quick heads up on what each pillar looks like and sounds like. So welcome to pillar number 1, mission and strategic goals. Now, this pillar, as you all know from doing the work, really plays a unique role among the 4 elements of this framework because it is the proverbial heartbeat of a CDFI. It answers the fundamental why question. Why are you doing your work? Why are you in the communities that you are? Without these core elements of a clear mission, a real strong focus on who you're serving and strategic direction, frankly, we know all the other pillars are a little bit like a meandering ship without a rudder. Right? You're a bit directionless if you don't have this particular pillar clear in your minds within your organization. So what we hope this pillar offers is just some good reminders around determining a definitive mission, target market, corresponding strategies that result in clear understanding of needs and execution. So that is pillar number one. You'll see that the elements really help you dig a bit more deeply into defining that clear mission and target market. And we also get into some of the critical elements around strategic management tools and processes. So the work of strategic planning, as well as the link to annual operating plans, how you flow from strategic planning into that annual operating planning cycle, and the importance of the functional feedback loop. So that is pillar number one. Pillar number two is now we transition from the why into the what. So really the pillar number two is about a CDFI's lending policies and procedures. So detailing, as you can see on the list here, loan products, staff responsibilities, loan risk management, and some other items that describe the deployment of your financial products and services. And just as importantly, some of those corresponding risk mitigation strategies to ensure success. So we know the primary tool CDFIs typically use to codify this particular pillar is a board-approved loan policy, often in the form of a loan policy manual. This we know will also probably touch on for you, some of you all, procedures. Typically, we find those are codified separately in perhaps a document or series of documents that are approved by your management or your loan committee. So that's really what this particular pillar encompasses. And here's what we also know, right, team? We know that lending strategy serves as the programmatic playbook, right, for you all and your CDFIs. So we want to help support the strength of this lending pillar with robust set of tools that help you build and then grow a vibrant lending program that effectively meets the specific needs of your CDFI that you've identified within your communities, and while also making sure that we're mitigating risk, right? So sustainability always a top of mind for us within CDFI work. That's pillar number two, lending strategy. Now, as we go into pillar number three, we're going to transition. So we talked about pillar number one, which is our why, pillar number two, which is our what. Now we're going to move into pillars 3 and 4, which start to get into the how. This particular one, I have to say, is a favorite of mine because I typically live in this space a lot in the work that I do. And the organizational infrastructure pillar, right, what this one is about, really reflects how y'all mobilize your organizational capacity to execute the mission, the strategy, the lending activity, right, the things we just talked about. So as you'll see, this is human resources, systems, structures required to deploy your financial products, services, and manage your loan portfolio as well as the day-to-day back office. So something I want to offer here around this pillar in particular, this is one of those kind of pro tip observations that we've incorporated into the framework. The reason that this pillar has a particular special place in my heart is that both as a practitioner, which is how I started in the CDFI industry almost 20 years ago now, as a staff member within a CDFI, and somebody who was participating in the lending program, is that I found, as somebody who was working to grow a loan portfolio, frankly, at times, I was pretty focused on growing that portfolio and really on pillars 1 and 2, right? The front end, the origination end. And sometimes, and now in my work as a consultant, see that it's easy for us at times to lose a little bit of focus on pillar number 3, right? Because we're focused on the front end. So this is one that I really appreciated spending some time on, because it's not uncommon, I think, for all of us in the CDFI world to allow organizational growth to slightly outpace or maybe substantially outpace our ability or capacity in some way. So this one is one that I want to lift up as an opportunity for us to think about as practitioners, as supporters. How do we prioritize this? Because really this is some of the secret sauce around building that consistent, reliable, efficient organizational horsepower to accomplish our mission. Pillar number 3, a goodie. And now we move to pillar number 4. So this is the second in the how, the how of what we do. This completes that picture. So financial strategy, as you see from the bullets, this is around cash management, financial sustainability, risk management functions, etc. And we all know in the work that you all are doing, your financial results are really an outcome of the decisions that you all are making about products and services, pricing, cost of capital, right? Levels of acceptable risk. And we want to lift up that this pillar really underscores, I think, the mutually reinforcing nature of this framework. We hope that that's your experience with this, because decisions that you make in those other three pillars we just talked about, we know can have a direct impact on the CDFI's finances. So, and we also know this pillar, for example, can serve as a driver for all of the other pillars. So we know that financial performance can fuel or hamper your deployment, your infrastructure, your staffing, your systems, all the way up to potentially mission fulfillment. So our goal with this pillar was to offer some very straightforward, some very practical, both tools and guardrails, if you will, around management and best practice for budget, for financial projections, cash management, capitalization, and just more broadly, frankly, financial management. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome to the four pillars and welcome to the strategic management framework. We're really excited to have you all revisit it, look at it, give us some terrific feedback. You'll also see included in the framework, we've got some links to tools and resources, some of which you've already heard from Amber. So with that, we want to ask a quick question, and then we're going to hear more from John about his experiences as an emerging CDFI in using this tool. And that is, we're curious, and feel free to use your chat, or if you're super excited, we'd love to hear from you. Has anybody recently either thought about or attempted to refresh or revisit their management approaches around these core elements? Is there anybody who's actively in that space right now, thinking about, talking about, what it is you're doing from a strategic management perspective? And James, thanks for your comment. We sure appreciate it. Welcome as a newer CDFI director. Great, Marnie, thanks for letting us know. You all are reconsidering all four areas, so really excited to hear what your experiences are as you interact with this framework. Great, so feel free, keep letting us know where you're at, folks, and what you may be revisiting, because it'll help us when we move into the question and answer period, get a little deeper sense of how we can be of assistance and what's on your mind. So be thinking about some questions you have around any or all of these areas or this tool. And with that, John, I'm going to pass it to you to share a little bit about your own experience.
And thank you so much, Leslie, and everyone in attendance today. I spent the bulk of my career in government relations when I worked at Capital Impact, policy development. And so I always tell people that I left the government relations world because the staffers on the Hill were getting to the age where they could be my kids. So I decided it was time to do something else. So I went from there to business development, obviously. And it's really all about the same thing. It's relationships. And so as a component of that, I've never been a loan officer. I've never underwritten a loan. And so, for someone like me who is starting at a disadvantage from a financial lending standpoint, the way the pillars laid out was essentially how we work to create Rochdale Capital. Obviously, we start, with the mission, and what the framework allowed me to do was fill in some of the gaps. And so obviously we have our mission statement, we had our business plan, but there were some things that I didn't know, or some things that came across from the strategic piece that we were able to make some changes after reading the framework. And so, that laid the foundation for us as an organization. Next, obviously, again, as the pillars go, they follow in the same type of succession. The organizational piece, like, for example, I'm going to give a shout out right now to my two colleagues, Claude Hare, who's our chief loan officer, and Chantal Hart, who is our manager of operations and compliance. I definitely could not do everything that I'm doing right now without them. And so I think the most important piece on the lending strategy side was we had to obviously go in and have our lending policies written, board approved, create a loan committee. And so even there, we were able to go back and make a few changes because of what we saw in the framework. Obviously, again, you can't cover all the bases, but I think it was good for us to be able to see what other folks are doing. My favorite part of the entire report are the pro tips and the very end of it, because again, it kind of summarizes everything. And so from a lending strategy standpoint, and I'm proud to say that we will close on our first 2 loans, I think Friday of this week. And so again, it's just been incremental steps. And so I think one part of this, I think people sleep on. I think it's the infrastructure. Obviously, we're small. It doesn't hurt to have a strategic partner and a founding partner like NCB. Let me be clear: we're totally separate and unaffiliated from the bank. But at the same time, we have our own board. We have our own separate Microsoft suite and all this kind of things. We pay for stuff in their office. Who knew about B&O insurance, and who knew about all of these things that people take for granted? And although we're located inside the National Cooperative Bank, we do pay for our one office and our 2 cubes that are there, as well as we insure them. And so who would think about something like that? And so as you look at the organizational infrastructure piece, I think that even for a larger and certified CDFI, I think that would make someone think about, well, what about our structure? Or are we making sure we're doing this? There's no CDFI governance 101, and so you have to learn about that. And with a new board, some who have CDFI experience and some who do not. And as someone who's a new CEO, they're learning me just as much as I'm learning them, and staff as well. And so I think that the refresh piece, as Leslie had mentioned, is just as important again as most CDFIs now. Like, listen, CDFIs have gone from being an idea to a movement, to an industry. And I often say, I really wish we go back to being the movement so that we don't forget where we came from. Got a chance to meet Ambassador Andrew Young once. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, John, do you know why the civil rights movement ended? And I said, no, Ambassador Young, why? He said, because Black folk got air conditions and they stopped going out here in the world and doing that. And so listen, as an industry, we got air conditions now, and that's great, but we've got to get back to the movement, I think, in so many ways as we move forward. And then lastly, as someone who didn't have that financial background, and we have a finance consultant and whatnot, there were things that he wasn't aware of as somebody who had never really worked for a CDFI that were very helpful to him, because he didn't read it, but I gave him some things for us to think about from a cash management standpoint, the tools that we're using, as well as portfolio pieces. And so I just think that the way that it's laid out, number one, is helpful. I think number two, as someone who, again, has been in the industry for a long time, but didn't know a lot of these things, it was humbling. But when you get a tool like this, it allows you to check back in on some things that you didn't know about. And like I said, it's a living, breathing document in my mind. And so there may be a revision or some changes, or there may be folks who read it and go, hey, OFN or Leslie, you may want to think about this, that are out there. And so I just feel strongly that for any emerging CDFI, they're 1,300 plus now and more every day, that it's going to provide you a very strong foundation for what you want to do moving forward, because there are nuggets in there that, again, we didn't think about as an organization, but that we're now implementing or executing because of reading this document. So I'm excited for everyone to see it. I'm excited for everyone to read it. And I'm serious when I say to you all that please reach out to me and let me know some things that are happening or some things that I can do as a emerging CDFI, because I wake up in the morning thinking about capitalization. I go to bed at night thinking about capitalization as an emerging CDFI. So I doubt I'll be in many sessions at the OFN conference. I'll be in many meetings talking about capitalization. But again, even that part of the pillar isn't something that I think people think about or whatnot. So I'm working on our capitalization plan now, based upon some of the things that I've learned in the framework. So I'm gonna put my email in the chat. Please don't be shy. Again, this is a tremendous opportunity for those on the phone who are well established to just have an opportunity to have access to Leslie and OFN and Amber. And we're not a member yet, but as soon as we get that certification, we will be paying our dues the next day to be OFN members. So with that said, welcome any questions, and I'll turn it back over to whoever, but just wanted to let folks know that, this has been Rochdale Capital's journey, and I'm honored and proud to be on this journey with each and every one of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much to Leslie and John and the whole team for their leadership on this. It has been a journey, and really this is now we're opening it up to you for questions. This is, I've seen some questions in the chat, and please ask some more, and we'll direct them out. And in the meantime, Leslie may have some, pointed questions or you can raise your hand and unmute.
Great, thank you, Amber. I just want to react to some of the great conversation that I see in the chat, and just really appreciating everybody's willingness to share both how you find yourself in the CDFI industry, how your cool path to get here, as well as some of the questions and things that you all have on your minds right now. I, like John, and I think probably many of you, arrived in this industry circuitously, actually as a newspaper reporter, was my first career, and then found myself in the CDFI industry about 20 years ago. And so all of my learning was very much on the job, and learned from a lot of great folks within the organization that I worked in, as well as at OFN conferences. And so, these tools, we hope, help create some more kind of formalized and organized way for you all to really check in on how things are going and where you're headed. And I really want to lift up and appreciate some of the comments around Marnie, for example, lifting up that the intersections, some of the meta questions about the interaction between people and systems, people and process. And we hope that this kind of conversation and these tools can help you think about that. Also, some really great conversation in the chat I'm seeing about organizational capacity, and really, it sounds like some sort of me too's around that organizational capacity observation as you grow, or as you shift, or as conditions change. I think for all of us, it's really easy to find ourselves in a caught a little short, or caught on our heels a bit from an organizational capacity perspective, as we try and really move toward opportunity and fill gaps. And you all in each of your organizations did such an amazing job stepping up to the plate during COVID. So I think all of that shuffling and all that hustle over the last 2.5 years does provide us all an opportunity to just take a breath, first and foremost, and then take a step back and say, what did we learn? And what might that do, and how it informs all of these pillars moving forward? So really just inviting folks to see that as an opportunity as well. As I'm seeing a lot of good conversation and some good questions and answers you all sharing among one another here about where you're headed. So also seeing some conversation here around like cybersecurity insurance, some more tactical pieces. Just a heads up, we have a bit on, for example, cybersecurity of all things. We do have an example that we'll share, a link in the toolkit to an example of a cybersecurity policy. We do have some very high level content, frankly, around insurance, various types of insurances you're going to want to consider. Again, all just designed to tee you up for some thought work and thought processes as you either build a new CDFI, or as you're continuing to innovate and strengthen the capacity of an existing CDFI. So all things to think about. Curious if anybody wants to pipe up. I know this is a larger crew, And I know we're all friends here. So I'm curious if anybody wants to verbally ask a question or offer a comment or a reaction to some of what you've heard thus far from any of us in the webinar.
I can say that there was one question in the chat that was asking about how do you build your organizational chart around these 4 pillars. And I think that that's a really interesting question, not only for new CDFIs, but, you know, I'm the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer, and people are always asking for resources. And that's a really hard question to answer of like, where do we build our org chart, or where are the resources? And you know, from my perspective, it's really important to go to your core mission and build it up from the bottom, right? So who do you want to serve? Where do you have talent and existing capacity? And then think about where are the areas that you can shore up and build, and where are the areas that you need to bring in talent. And so the 4 pillars can help identify, you know, areas that need to be covered, but it's really your work to analyze, I think, the where you're going to put where the North Star of the organization is, and build up from that. And the 4 pillars can help you identify those things. Leslie or John, anything to add to that?
Let me just offer, John, real quick, and then you know, go deep on your experience here. There is in the toolkit, as it happens, we've got a direct also tool that might be helpful on that particular question. And all the credit here goes to Barbara Ekblad, who developed this. We have a functional org chart, linked to a functional org chart in the framework, so that it would give you the opportunity to look at comprehensively what are all of the key functions to think about and to attend to. Let me say that functional org chart, don't get worried, right? If you are a CDFI of 2 or 3 or 5 people and you see a lot of boxes on your screen, they're functions. They may not necessarily be people, but they're functions for you to consider as you think about the various, again, roles and responsibilities that need to be attended to. For the larger CDFIs on this call, and also the longer established CDFIs on this call, we hope that functional org chart gives you the opportunity to just frankly revisit how you're aligning organizational resources against those key functions. I think particularly, again, on the back half of a global pandemic, really to revisit and take a look at where do those key functions lie? Where have there maybe been shifts over these last 2.5 years as you pivoted quickly to meet community where they're at? So just offering that. John, what are your...
And Leslie, I think you hit that out of the ballpark. So I wasn't going to touch on that, but I forgot one of the most important parts of the framework, and I'm thankful. And anyone who knows me or seen me on a panel for the last 6 years know how important racial equity or equity and inclusion are to me. So I'm really happy that was included in the report. I think you know, I say, and I get in trouble for it sometimes, but you know, every day we get further and further from George Floyd. Some of the commitments and things that people have done in the past are, you know, they go down every day. And so I think by bringing up the equity and inclusion piece as a part of the framework is very important, as we need to be thinking about these things. Number one, and number two, as a graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, which is the largest HBCU in the country, I implore CDFIs all across the country to look to those business schools for talent, and look to those business schools for people. I mean, I'm a poli-sci major. I mean, and I'm running a CDFI. What? You know, anyway, I'm just saying.
Me too, John.
There you go. So again, I jokingly told somebody one day that if I had a shirt on that said I went to a HBCU and I run a CDFI, people might just come up and start hugging me, you know, because again, it's such a big thing now, CDFIs as well as HBCUs. And so just a plug for all of the historical Black colleges and universities across the country to definitely include them in your talent searches as you look to expand or grow your CDFI.
And don't overlook poli-sci majors, right, John? That's our other tip. Don't overlook those poli-sci majors. We're sleepers. Great.
This is Terry Smith from Casa, Oregon. I just wanted to piggyback on John's comment. I have a son who goes to Howard U, so big ups to HBCUs. And he is a business major, actually in finance. I am really shocked, to tell you the truth, that there isn't more connection with their business program in CDFIs. With OFN being right there in DC, I would love to see that connection made, and I would be happy to be a part of that.
Is he need an internship this summer, Terry?
He is not.
Well,
Okay.
Terry, I'll put my
Let's
email
try.
address
Let's try.
in. But we have definitely tried to reach out, and we are doing more. This is a huge area of focus for OFN, and we really want to lead and help work with you to bring in the most diverse talent and new talent and really make CDFIs a mainstream name. Sindhu, who is on this call but not on screen, she's going to be leading a lot of this effort. So I'm very, very excited for what's coming, and keep posted.
Come on, folks, don't be shy. I'm an introvert. I'm doing all this talking. Come on.
So I saw a question, Leslie, you want to talk about where does the development and fundraising function fit into the pillars? And then the other question was, do most CDFIs report to the big three business bureaus? So we can take those one at a time. But
Yeah, great
first one,
question.
you,
Yeah,
so-
development. Where does it live? So couple thoughts. And curious also, again, always encourage people to hear your thoughts in the chat, or if you want to chime in, we'd love to hear from you all in the trenches. So on the functional org chart, that'll give you a thought just structurally, because you'll see that, there's a whole portion of the functional org chart where development lives. And within the pillars themselves, you're going to see threads of development in both pillars 3 and 4, which will probably be no surprise to you at all, right? Because we know that pillars, from an organizational infrastructure perspective, we need to attend to that work. And of course, it's going to help really drive what happens in pillar 4. So really want to lift up the intersection here of development and capitalization planning, and multi-year projections, right? And how those functions are really critically intertwined. And so we want to continue to, again, help reinforce this notion of the interdependence of so much of the work, while also, we hope, providing you some real specifics around, for example, where functions and responsibilities can live. So something like the functional org chart can tee you up in that more tactical sort of frame, while I think the narrative portions of pillars 3 and 4, we hope, can provide you some thoughts around how to increase both your development capacity, as well as ensure that it is tightly aligned with the work that you're doing, frankly, from a larger financial planning perspective. So those are a couple of things that I would offer. And then let me just answer very quickly that credit bureau question, because it's a terrific one. And if anybody has any current data, I would love to hear it. Please put it in the chat. I don't have any empirical data around rates. And I bet the great folks at Credit Bureaus Alliance would, if somebody's from CD on this call, you might chat it out right there. But I don't know what the current rates are, but what I do know is that CBA has been working really hard to help increase the number of CDFIs that are reporting through their organization and building and expanding that capacity. What I also know, having just worked with a CDFI to get them up and running, frankly, with credit bureaus using the CBA, the great CBA team, is that I would encourage you all to see the four pillars, and really taking yourselves through, if you've not in any more recently, to think about doing a refresh, or at least a review of these 4 pillars from a capacity perspective, because if you're not yet reporting to credit bureaus, they're going to be very interested, of course, in your organizational capacity and your operational execution. And so we hope that some of the pieces, particular, I would say, in pillars 2, 3, and 4, can help you ensure that you have the operational robustness in place to be able to execute the kind of work that the credit bureaus are going to want to have you be ready to do. And just a big shout out to CBA, great team over there. They know a lot about this work, and so they can help you with that work and that process. And finally, just frankly, a mission plug, folks, for those of you who are not yet reporting to credit bureaus, regardless of the sector you're in, for those who are doing direct B2C work, right? Business to customer. You've got individual borrowers of some sort, whatever type of product that is. Folks, we do such a service to our clients when we make sure we're reporting to credit bureaus, because remember, that's how we make sure we move them from credit invisibility to credit visibility, and really help them be able to counteract some of those more systemic barriers that still exist within our traditional financial system. So just a quick plug. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but don't want to lose that opportunity. Amber, checking in with you again. You have such robust experience here too. Anything you'd add to those pieces, given your fund experience and just across your great career?
No, I think that's really spot on. One thing in the chat that I did want to mention is that people noted that the CDFI fund is going to revisit their certification policies, and that asked if we were going to do a refresh of this. You know, as part of our future work, we will, you know, try to make sure that all of our information is up to date. One thing though that I was very comfortable with in the 4-pillar strategy is that there's some fundamental truths in the CDFI certification process that are written into the statute. So those truths, those 7 criteria of CDFI certification won't go anywhere, but how they're implemented or how you get approved for those will change. So just to note that line, that this is kind of a fundamental document, and while there might need to be some tweaking, I think fundamentally the requirements of certification will not change. How they're measured will, and what target markets mean and things like that.
Any other, Amber, questions you're seeing, or Sindhu, any other questions you're seeing, or again, any observations that folks want to chime in with?
Yeah, there was a question about insurance brokers. Richard, I can respond to you directly, or we can put some information into CDFI Connect. I do want to put out a plug that CDFI Connect is a great way for us to continue this conversation and ask the questions around credit bureaus and insurance and those things. It's a really great way to connect outside of these webinars.
Amber, this is Brett Traver with Southeast Kentucky Economic Development. Around insurance, we found that being a member of our Kentucky Bankers Association was really helpful. They handle our health insurance and all kinds of stuff there, and then cybersecurity. They've been really helpful in that as well. So, if you're not, we're a financial institution, so they've welcomed us into the Kentucky Bankers Association as an associate member, dues paying, and have access. And there's only 8 people on our staff, so it put us into a group health insurance plan as well with about 5,000 other people.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
And Brett, I'd offer too for folks. I'm really glad to hear that you, with your Bankers Association, I'm assuming it's a chapter of the ABA there. That's great to hear. And for folks who might live in states where the ABA chapter hasn't quite gotten to the place, right, where they've got the CDFI associate members yet. There are some states where that's the case, so we'll keep working on that. There are in some states a community bankers association as well. So I'll just offer that too, Brett. Just such a great reminder that looking for organizations that have pooled insurance resources and can be really helpful for CDFIs. And if your chapter of ABA is not quite at the place where it's great to hear, Brett, yours is, look at your community bankers association as well.
There was one other question in the chat about looking for loan origination software and process business loans. Is there any recommendations? I can open that up to the chat, just maybe highlight that. But that's not necessarily a question for the panel. So I'm going to leave that to the chat. Any other questions or thoughts? Just, while you're doing that, a quick reminder, you can register for next week's webinar on CDFI lending policies. And we have the cash management webinar from last week, and it's up, and you can grab all those tools and start using it in conjunction with these 4 pillars document. With that, I am going to put a call out for last questions or comments. So there was a question around loan risk management is big for CDFIs to mitigate risks. Do we have any ways of measuring risk other than the year-end financials? Yeah, there's a lot of ways of measuring risk. And I think I'm going to pass this off to Leslie because she's nodding vigorously. So maybe there's a spot in this 4 pillars that she can direct you to.
Yeah. Oh, we could spend a whole other webinar on that particular question. And I love, as a former collector, spent some time doing collections, love the question. So yes, oh my goodness. There are lots and lots and lots of places where I would encourage you actually to look for opportunities to measure risk within your portfolio. And I would really encourage you to appreciate that notion of year-end financial views, but I'd also encourage you to think about shorter term views of risk, right? What are near-term risks within your organization, within your portfolio, and what are longer term, like annual risks within your portfolio. Also want to invite you to think about both at the individual borrower level, and I want to invite you to think about at the portfolio level. We want to measure and monitor risk at both of those levels, and as comprehensively as our resources will allow us to do, in both, again, the short term and the near term. And so my invitation to you within the framework is you're going to see some proverbial breadcrumbs leading you to the promised land of perfect risk management, we hope, in pillars, frankly, 2, 3, and 4. Also really want to invite you to put that 28th webinar on your calendar, because the loan policy piece that Barbara Ekblad took the lead on and I participated in along with Lisa Wagner, that's going to offer you some even deeper kind of tactical suggestions around risk management. So please tune in on the 28th, and please check out the link to that resource that Amber so kindly offered you at the beginning of the webinar.
And the last thing that I'd like to plug in about risk, and this is my own personal opinion, is be really careful about perceived risk versus real risk. This is where we start to embed our bias and preconceived notions into this process. And as CDFI lenders, we're trying to disrupt the model of some traditional finance. So I really want you to think about that. And we'll talk about that more in our loan policies. But, for example, how do you use appraisals? And appraisals are flawed. There's articles in the New York Times. There's these very fundamental things. But we've been told, loan to value, you can use your appraisals. So think about, again, that a perceived risk of loan to value versus a cash flow underwriting model that could really look to repayment or and look at these other kind of really, what are you trying to solve for? So I think it's really helpful for us to think through it in that way as well. Well, with that, it's 2:57. I want to thank you so much for participating the whole time. We had such a robust conversation, and thank you so much for that sharing of resources in the chat. And I look forward to seeing many of you in New York next month. Here's the next week. Put it on your calendar. Thank you.